Space begins when we have a body. Time begins when we start thinking. Causation begins when we apply limitations. That gem of understanding is drawn from the Vedanta, a school of thought that interprets the Vedas, the Upanishads, and really helps us relate to what reality might be. And that's what we're going to explore this evening. The Upanishads, if you want to translate it as loosely as possible, means sit close by. So that's what you're doing tonight. You here at the Rubin Museum of Art in the foothills of Chelsea, where we explore high Himalayan and Indian philosophy. And those of you who are watching us and following us on Facebook, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be engaged for the next hour and a half in a conversation about reality, but also where the future fits into that. Because at the Rubin this year, we're exploring the nature of the future. The future is fluid. It's even got a hashtag. So use it if you like in social media. But beyond that, what are we doing with our time? What does time actually mean? And what future is out there for us? And are we capable of changing it? These are many of the questions that we're exploring this year, and they're very, very timely. Excuse the pun, because we've got a lot of decisions to make together as a community to do so. So sit close by and listen to two teachers meeting for the first time ever on this stage here at the Rubin Museum of Art. And they are, of course, Swami Sarvapriyananda, who is the minister and spiritual leader of the Vedanta Society in New York. And he's been a teacher all his life. So it's wonderful that we can have the full benefit of his grounding, his intellect and his heart and his deeper understanding of these philosophies that have come down to us over so many thousands of years. So Swamiji, thank you so much for coming back to the Rubin. He's no stranger. In fact, Swamiji's film that he made for us to talk about the nature of time was actually what captured and caught Dr. Deepak Chopra's attention when he was last here. And that is in a way the genesis of how the two came together, because when Dr. Chopra saw Swamiji on film, he said, I need to meet this man. And this is what's happened. Dr. Chopra, of course, is world-renowned as a pioneer in many things, in integrative medicine, in spiritual transformation. But one thing that he's really done is to bridge the gap between different schools of understanding about how we perceive reality. And that means not only consciousness studies, but also he teaches and is professor at business schools, economic forums, yes, medicine, of course, and also spiritual convocations. And it's this cross-disciplinary thinking that has brought him such not only attention, but he has been the conduit to pay our attention to the things that really, really matter. And that is his great contribution, I think, to our society. So Deepak, thank you so much for joining us also again at the Rubin. So we're going to witness these two thinkers together in a conversation for 45 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And we'll be done by 8:30, and that's an expression of time, I understand. So thank you. My name is Tim McHenry. I direct programs and engagement here at the Rubin, and you're so very welcome. And we will now invite our speakers to the stage, Dr. Deepak Chopra and Swami Sarvapriyananda.
So, thank you for being here. We have approximately 40 minutes to solve the mystery of existence. So, without wasting any time, I'm going to start talking to Swamiji. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll just give a very short introduction, and then we'll get going, okay? So how many people here have heard the phrase, the hard problem of consciousness? How many people have not? Okay. Well, if you do a Google search and you ask, what are the 150 open questions in science? The first open question in science is, what's the universe made of? And the answer is, we don't know, because 96% of the universe is mysterious dark energy, dark matter. I'm not going to go into that. 4% of the universe is atomic. Of the 4% of the universe that's atomic, 99.99% is invisible interstellar dust, so we can't see it. The visible universe, which we are now told, according to the scientific model, is 2 trillion galaxies. 2 trillion galaxies. So we live in the Milky Way galaxy with 100 billion stars. Next door is Andromeda, same number of stars, Virgo, on, keep going, 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion planets, I don't even know how to write that, and according to current scientific models, trillions, uncountable trillions of planets, possibly 60 billion habitable planets in our own galaxy, based on what they call the Goldilocks zone. That's only 0.01% of the universe. That's 0.01. The rest is unknown or unknowable. And the 0.01% that's atomic, if you go deep into the nature of atoms, they become particles, and then particles have this mysterious behavior that when they're not being looked at or they don't interact with other particles, they become waves. And unlike particles, which are units of mass and have units of mass and energy, waves just exist as possibilities. Bottom line, the universe is made out of nothing. So why does it look like this? That's the hard problem of consciousness. Why does it look like this? How do atoms and molecules in the brain or electrical impulses create this experience? This experience, the experience of your own body, the experience of your own mind. And actually most people now think this hard problem is unsolvable if you think of matter as foundational. If matter is the ontological primitive, then the problem is unsolvable. So that's why we have Swamiji. He's going to solve the problem for us very quickly by telling us there's no hard problem at all. If you take the reverse point of view, and that is consciousness is fundamental and matter is a human construct. But without now me going on and on, Swamiji, Vedanta has solved this problem. What is Vedanta?
Well, thank you for the introduction, Deepak. Vedanta is a philosophical system or a family of philosophical systems based on very ancient texts called the Upanishads. And these Upanishads are the highest teachings of the Vedas. The Vedas, as we know, are very ancient scriptures of the Hindu religion. So these Upanishads, they contain certain insights about who we are, what we are, and what reality is. The rishis, the ancient sages who came upon these insights, they found that by knowledge of these insights, by getting these insights, it actually it solves the very human problem of suffering, the problem of death, of meaninglessness. The crucial human problems, they are actually solved if you have knowledge about what we are and what this reality we live in is what we are experiencing. If you want me to put it in one sentence, and happily we can do that, the sentence is, that thou art. You are. Tattvamasi. It means there is an absolute reality of this universe which can be known or realized, and luckily for us, we are that absolute reality. Tattvamasi means that you are that absolute reality of which entirety of this universe and the person you experience yourself to be, these are manifestations of that one absolute reality, which is called Brahman in the Upanishads. Tattvamasi means that thou art, and this identity is the essential teaching of Vedanta, and they claim that it actually can be experienced in life. It's not speculation. It can be experienced, and it must be experienced in order to overcome suffering. So this is basically the core teaching of Vedanta.
And that absolute reality is usually expressed in English as pure consciousness. Would you
Yes,
say that?
Pure consciousness or pure existence. The Sanskrit terms are Sat, which means pure being or isness, existence. Chit, which means awareness, consciousness in itself. But also, happily, and pun intended, Ananda, which means happiness. So, joy or bliss. So, as Swami Vivekananda put it, existence itself, consciousness itself, and bliss itself. That is the nature of the ultimate reality which Vedanta speaks about.
So let's now use one term for convenience, Sat Chit Anand, just for lack of, for economy of expenditure of energy. Let's just use the word consciousness.
Absolutely.
And so consciousness is the basis of every experience we have, whether it's mind or body or the universe, right?
Right.
So give your definition of consciousness and how you would explain.
You've got only the easiest questions for me. Give your definition of consciousness. In fact, it is interesting that we live in interesting times. So I was just talking to Deepak a little while ago. Consciousness studies has become very important in the last 20-25 years. Scientists were not so interested in consciousness until about 25 or 30 years ago. But right now, consciousness studies is booming. There are psychologists are obviously interested in it. Neuroscientists are interested in it. Linguists and philosophers and people. Cosmologists are interested in it. Computer scientists are interested in it. So you think that all of these people are interested, so they know what they're talking about. Well, they cannot agree on what they're talking about. What is the definition of consciousness? There is no consensus. There are multiple definitions of consciousness, but none of them are acceptable across the board. In fact, a friend of mine who's a mathematician and a monk, he told me that I don't take this entire field of consciousness studies too seriously. I said, why ever not? Because it seems to be what we are doing as monks. He said, any field of study where you cannot define the subject of study is not yet a mature field of study. All right, now what Deepak is asking me is, give me a definition of consciousness. So I'm going to give you a definition of consciousness from the Vedanta perspective, where actually they are very clear on what they mean by consciousness. Get this. Whatever you are aware of is not consciousness. It's what is called a via negativa definition, a definition by exclusion. That means anything that you're aware of. Right now you are aware of sights and sounds and smells, all of this. So they are objects of consciousness, you are aware of them, and that which is aware of them is consciousness.
So then consciousness is basically awareness of experience, right?
Is the awareness in which experience becomes possible. Yeah.
So here, I attend these conferences that you're talking about, and people come up with all kinds of definitions. So some materialists say consciousness is first-person experience. Others say consciousness is the knowing element in every experience. But I think the non-dualists these days, a lot of non-dualists in the West too, they're saying that consciousness is the knowing element in every experience. So right now you know that you're having this experience. You also know that you have a body. You also know that you have a mind. So what is it that knows this experience called mind, body, world? Other non-dualists have expanded on that and said consciousness is that in which all experience occurs, all experience is known, and out of which all experience is made. Right. So you started off by saying consciousness is not anything that is an object.
Yes.
So this what is this? This is an experience in consciousness, right?
Right. Look at the words which Deepak just used right now. The knowing element, that by which knowledge is possible. Now what Vedanta would say is that if you carefully look at knowledge, all your experience, and eliminate mentally, in your understanding, eliminate from your experience whatever is objective. By which I mean, you're looking at this beaker, this jar here. This is objective because it's an object of you're looking at it, it's an object. But what is looking at it? Your eyes. But you're aware of your eyes. Your eyes are open, closed, the guy is boring me so much I can't keep my eyes open. You're aware of that. So the eyes are also objects in your awareness. Now, you are aware of your eyes with your mind. You're thinking about your eyes. So the thoughts in the mind, you're also aware of that. So even the thoughts in the mind are objects of awareness. In this way, if you eliminate, again in understanding, everything that is objective, everything that is an object in your experience, you are left with consciousness as it is. And don't try to catch it. Now we'll get consciousness as it is. You will never get it that way because that would be an object. So it is the you, the real you. In fact, one definition of consciousness offered by one of the disciples of the great Shankaracharya, in Sanskrit, Anidam Chaitanyam. Very elegant definition. What is it? Not this awareness. From your awareness, from your experience just now, if you eliminate in your understanding everything that you can call this jar, this body, this eye, this mind, this thought, if you eliminate that which shines upon all of them, that is consciousness.
And what shines is the knowing element. So as Swamiji said, you can't go looking for consciousness because it is that which is doing the looking, right? You can't find it out there because it's that which is looking at what's out there. But let's go a little deeper further. Now that you have created the basis now that
yes.
Consciousness is not an object. The object is experience in consciousness. Now this is also an object, right? This body is also an object. And the thoughts are also an object.
Right.
So can we say, let's say you're a baby, you just showed up in the world, which by the way has already been interpreted for every baby for 2,000 plus years, ever since people started to speak in language and created culture and started telling stories. People started interpreting experience, and we are born into an interpreted world before we are born. You see, you're a baby, what you see here is not a shoe, you see a color, a shape.
Right.
If you touch it, it's a sensation. If you can smell it, taste it if you want, but or make noise out of it.
Yeah.
So these are sensory experiences, right? Without labels.
Right.
But then humans create labels and create constructs. We call that a shoe, we call this a hand, we call this a body, we call this the world.
Right.
And then we give names, and you were earlier on explaining to me, this is the whole phenomenon that we call Nam Rupa.
Right.
But this naming creates a human construct of what is really a sensory perception, which in turn is a mental activity, which in turn, as you just said,
is an
activity in consciousness.
Right.
So if we take that literally,
Yeah.
then this is also made out of consciousness.
This is, I think, Deepak's favorite theme, that everything is made out of consciousness. But here's the thing here, because that's what one of the schools of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, these Upanishads I was speaking about. So great philosophers came along and they took these Upanishads and they developed very complex but very coherent and consistent systems of philosophy based on these Upanishads. So they became the different schools of Vedanta. One school which is very well known is Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. There, the idea is that not only are you consciousness, but then everything else is also consciousness. Now this might sound, as somebody told me recently, a materialist. It's a wacky idea. It's a crazy idea. How can everything be consciousness? But it goes like this. Once you say that whatever is objective is not consciousness, that which is aware of the objects is consciousness, then you are left with the entire world of objects, the entire universe out there, my own body, even the mind, they're all objects. Now I am the consciousness witnessing all of this. Now your question is, then what are these objects? And that's where Vedanta becomes very interesting. It says, all of the things that you experience in consciousness as objects are actually nothing other than consciousness itself. You, the pure consciousness, the entirely subjective consciousness, appears out there as a world set in space and time and full of objects with the help of name and form. So this names and forms, another name for this is Maya, name and form, Nama Rupa. So what you're seeing here is you, the consciousness, in yourself appears a mind, a body with its senses, and the senses reveal to it a universe of objects set out there apparently in time and space, including this glass jar. And all of this is name and form. Interpretation, as you said. Somebody put it very beautifully. Language is the knife with which you cut reality. So this patch of color, what it might look like to a baby, but the mother comes and explains, this is a jar of water.
And this is your body.
This is your body.
This is a hand, this is the world.
Yeah, and a concept of your body. Yeah, that also slowly a baby learns over time. That is my body.
So given this understanding and given the Vedic worldview and given the fact that we as humans we can only speak in language and explain things in language, and as soon as we create a word, we in a sense create a construct out of fundamental reality, which right now you said is consciousness, Tattvamasi, that's Aham Brahmasmi Tattvamasi. Given this construct, for our audience who's not familiar with these terms, can you help explain the difference between Jeeva, Atman, Brahman? And then let's go further after that. This is an opportunity to get Vedanta in less than an hour. Okay, so we can't waste time. Let's get it all out here.
Oh, Vedanta 101 then.
Yeah.
Yes. That absolute reality which Vedanta speaks about is called Brahman. And the word Brahman, etymologically, if you look at it in Sanskrit, it simply means the vast. That which has no limit. Just the vast. It's not the name of a particular god or anything like that. It's just the limitless, the vast.
Infinite.
The infinite. And by the way, when you talk about infinite, a mathematician or a scientist might want to ask you, what exactly do you mean by infinite? Because there are precisely defined infinites, more than one infinite in mathematics, for example. Vedanta has a very precise definition of the infinite. It says, that which is not limited in space, time, and object is the infinite. In Sanskrit, desha, kala, vastu, paricheda shunyam. Devoid of limitations in time, space, and object. What are limitations in time? Born at this time, dying at this time. Created and destroyed. So that's a limitation in time. If you do not have a limitation in time, what happens? You're eternal. There's no point where you are that is created, no point where it is destroyed.
So here's a very important thing to understand. Eternal doesn't mean stretching in time forever. Eternal means timeless, not in time at all.
You're right. It's not something which lasts a long time. That's one way of understanding eternal, but that's just a preliminary step. The real thing is your time is in you. You might ask, that sounds confusing. What do you mean time is in you? Vedanta means it in a very simple sense. When you experience time, right? That Tim just told us we're going to wrap up by 8:30. So it's in Tim's consciousness all the time that we're going to wrap up at 8:30. 8:30 is not aware of Tim. Tim is aware of 8:30. That's all that Vedanta means when it says that time is in consciousness and not consciousness in time.
Another human construct.
And no limitation in object. That's an interesting thing in Indian philosophy. Limitation in object means this glass jar is just a glass jar. It's not the table. It's not Deepak or me. So each object has its own identity and it's different from everything else. That's called limitation by object. And being infinite means it is not limited to any particular object, which means no object in the universe is different from Brahman. If no object is different from Brahman, there is no difference between Brahman and any other object. There is no second thing apart from Brahman, so that no second means Advaita, non-duality. So Brahman is that non-dual reality which is not limited by time, space or object.
That the objects in consciousness cannot limit consciousness. Consciousness is not limited by its contents. But now... Atman,
yes. That's the second important concept in Vedanta. Atman means you. So when Vedanta says that thou art, what it basically means, Brahman is equal to Atman. It means that infinite reality, not limited by time, space and object, is you. You might say, that sounds cool, but I can't really believe that. But it's you in a very special sense. Not you as a body, not you as the mind or as the unlimited person, but as that absolute consciousness which shines through that particular mind and body. So, which in fact shines through and reveals the person you take yourself to be. So that reality, beyond the person, that pure consciousness is called Atman. And Atman is equal to Brahman is basically the teaching of Vedanta. So if you say, what is Atman? The real me, or the real I, which is the reality of this universe also.
It's the self, not the selfie. This is a selfie, right?
Yes.
Deepak Chopra is a selfie. Your name and your form is your selfie at the moment through an act of perception. But when we say I, what is the I that is experiencing this name and this form, right?
I think the selfie idea, it struck me, in Vedanta we keep saying that you have to find out who am I or what am I. Because if you discover that, you have discovered the reality of the universe, self-knowledge. I think that's the real selfie. When you, instead of taking a picture of the body, if you could take a picture of yourself as you really are, that would be the ultimate selfie, I think. That would be a nice topic for a talk, I think. The ultimate
selfie. So now,
selfie.
what is the difference between Atman and Jeeva?
The Sanskrit term Jeeva, it's as we experience ourselves right now. If I tell you that you are pure consciousness, you might say, Swami, that sounds nice, but that's not how I see myself. How do you see yourself? How do you experience yourself? We experience ourselves as persons, as embodied in bodies which are born and change and age and decay and die. We enjoy and suffer. So this being, which is definitely a conscious being, but which finds itself limited to a body and mind, this is called the Jeeva.
And even that body-mind is an activity, it's not a noun, it's a verb, it's a changing process, right?
True.
In pure consciousness.
True. The body is a series of changes. We all know it, from birth till now and eventually from babyhood to childhood to being a teenager to a young person, middle age and an old person. It's a stream of changes in this physical matter. That's the body. And the mind changes even faster. I mean, today, from the morning till now, how many times you've been happy and irritated and curious and bored. The mind changes continuously. It's a series of changes at a subtle level. You experience it within yourself. And this body-mind series of changes appearing in consciousness, having forgotten its consciousness nature, is what we call the individual, the Jeeva. That's the Vedantic understanding of the person.
And this Jeeva is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm a novice. You're the expert.
Oh, you're not. He's been at it much longer than I have.
Yeah, but you have the training. Jeeva is programmed by, if I may use that word, by sanskara, karma, vasana, at a very fundamental level. So can you explain these terms?
Yes, our story does not begin at birth and does not end with death. We are very ancient creatures. Even the most newborn baby is actually a very, very ancient creature. We have existed many lives before, and there are possibly many more lives ahead of us. That's the Vedanta worldview. This Jeeva existed before this, it came to this particular body. It existed in other bodies, in other worlds. And so over an infinite period of time, through actions, it has been accumulating through cause and effect, what is called the law of karma. The law of karma, to put it very briefly, every action has its reaction or its effect. Every cause has its consequence. And this is something very fundamental in Indian philosophy. The enormous variety within Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, all the Indic philosophies, but they all accept the law of karma, that there is causality. Now, because of this, we are what we are today. It explains the differences between each jiva. As consciousness, we are one reality. But when you come to the mind and the body and the person, we are so different. We have different stories, different abilities, different problems and different possibilities. All of these differences are the results of past karma. And what we do with it right now generates new karma for future existences. So this is karma. The karma has two effects. One is it gives us this life, and the other is it has an effect on our minds. So the effect on our minds, our individual likes and dislikes, whether you prefer this or that, whether you hate this thing or that thing, those individual preferences are called samskaras. And they exist in the mind, in the subtle body. That's what the jiva takes away after death. Yeah.
So the karma, the sanskara, the vasanas, is that the personality with which, say, you have you have identical twins, they have the same fertilized ovum, but any mother will tell you that they're two different personalities. Is that coming from sanskara?
True. I mean, even children in the same household, you mentioned twins, but parents know how different they are. So these differences, though they come from the same parents, they're probably brought up in the same kind of environment, nature and nurture both seem to be similar, but then there's tremendous difference between children. So that comes, it's inherited from past lives. That's the Vedantic understanding of how we are so different.
Completing this map step by step, then even in Ayurveda we talk about physical body, sthul sharir, sukshma sharir, subtle body, mind, intellect, ego, causal body. Explain this map just a little bit, the physical body, the subtle body, and the causal body.
Okay, that's an important concept. But one thing I want everybody to know is Vedanta, it's not speculation. It's not even metaphysics. It's firmly grounded in experience. Whose experience? Your experience and my experience. So when you talk about a physical body, subtle body, causal body, it's all experiential and right now. You can see it right now. What is the physical body? That which you can see. You can see it, you can touch it, taste it, smell it. This is the physical body, yes. That which you see, which you can weigh, that's the physical body. Now, within this physical body is what Vedanta calls a subtle body. How do you know? You just have to close your eyes and look inside. You see, I'm happy, that's a subtle body. I'm unhappy, subtle body. I remember, I forget, I want, I dislike, I understand, I do not understand. All that you directly experience within yourself, this first person experience which we are having right now, that's the subtle body. And beyond that, Vedanta talks about something a little more obscure called the causal body, which is the blankness which we experience in deep sleep. If you right now try to experience yourself beyond the subtle body, what is it that it is which is experiencing the subtle body? You will tend to hit a blank wall if you see it right now. That is the causal body. And Vedanta says the real you, the Atman, is not the physical body. You are not this body. Is not the subtle body. Not even the mind, not even the person. Is not even the causal body. But that consciousness in which all of these are experienced. And the way I put it is, you can drive a car. That doesn't make you a car. You are embodied. We have a body. Vedanta doesn't deny that. You are experiencing a body and a mind. That's all there. But you are not that. You are not limited to that.
So every day, Swamiji, we go through this experience, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, right?
Yeah.
So we understand waking. This is waking.
Unless somebody is dozed off.
Yeah, unless somebody...
Always a problem with Vedanta.
Hopefully everybody is in the waking state right now. Okay, then the dream state, we also experience every night.
Yes.
And deep sleep we also experience every night. But in deep sleep, there is awareness, right? Not conscious experience, but awareness.
He has touched upon a very important subject. If you are saying that you are awareness, I am awareness, and this is constant, body changes, mind changes, then somebody might ask, what about deep sleep? What about the stages we call unconscious or under anesthesia? There's no awareness, there's no consciousness there. So where is this pure consciousness Vedanta talks about? Vedanta insists there is consciousness there. And that's where you begin to understand what Vedanta means by consciousness. See, a fundamental difference has to be understood here in concepts. Normally, in ordinary discourse, especially here in the West, we take the mind to be consciousness. So hearing, smelling, touching, talking, thinking, desiring, willing, remembering, this is called consciousness. But what Vedanta says is, this is consciousness plus the activity of the mind. So all the changes that you see are the mind, but consciousness is not the mind. It reveals the activity of the mind. And when the mind shuts down in deep sleep, the blankness, that nothingness that you experience in deep sleep, it's still an experience. I put it this way, deep sleep is not an absence of experience. It is an experience of absence. So that's what Vedanta, experience comes when consciousness has an object. In deep sleep, consciousness has no object because the world is not revealed, body has shut down. You're not using the body to experience the world. The mind is shut down, there are no dreams. So because there are no objects, it seems to be nothing. But you do wake up and then you do say, I slept like a log, I didn't know anything.
I slept like a baby.
I slept like a baby. This phrase is there, similar phrases are there in every language, showing that it's a common experience across all humanity. So that means it's an experience. It's not nothing. So there is consciousness in deep sleep. That's what, in fact, a recent book which talks about the phenomenon of that consciousness is there in deep sleep. It's called Waking, Dreaming, Being, yes, by Evan Thompson, who's a philosopher in the University of British Columbia. He says that even in deep sleep you have to admit consciousness, and he makes an interesting comment at the very beginning. He says that consciousness studies didn't begin 25 years ago. It began with the Upanishads 5,000 years ago. And he makes a tremendous statement. He says we should not date our history from AD and BC. We should date history from before Upanishads and after Upanishads. They are so important. Yes, a tremendous assertion he makes.
Let's talk about deep sleep and the relationship. Is deep sleep a kind of a clue, a window to what we call death?
Death. Okay.
Because
now we are moving into grim subjects.
When we go in India, when they do a cremation or frequently Bhagavad Gita is quoted,
chanted, yeah.
And Lord Krishna says the real you is not subject to birth or death, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it, fire cannot burn it, it's ancient, weapons cannot cleave it, it's unborn, it's not subject to death.
Right.
And many swamis like yourself, when they say what happens to you after death, their answer is, I was never born, which is very confusing to people. But what is the connection between, say, waking, dreaming, sleeping, and Turiya and death?
All right. You've used the term Turiya, which is a common term in Vedanta. It literally means the fourth. What do you mean by the fourth? Vedanta looks at it this way. There are different procedures, methodologies, if you will, for discovering ourselves as pure consciousness. And anybody can try them out. One of the methodologies is to use our common experience of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep to come to an intuition of ourselves as the witness consciousness of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. When you are identified with this person, this waking person, you are called the waker. Call it the first. When you are identified with the person you are in the dream, you're not aware that you're dreaming. It's a dream which you realize later, but you were there in the dream as a person. That person we call it the dreamer. Then deep sleep, that consciousness associated with deep sleep, when you wake up and say, I slept like a baby, call it the third, the deep sleeper. So you have the waker, the dreamer, and the deep sleeper. And these are the three which we are used to. We think of ourselves as, this is our experience. And what Vedanta teaches us, the insight, crucial insight of Vedanta is, you are not the first, the waker, not the second, the sleeper, the dreamer, not the third, the deep sleeper, but what it calls the fourth, the consciousness in which all of these are appearing and disappearing. So the consciousness is apart from these three and yet underlying all of these three. That fourth is called Turiya.
And that is not subject to birth, death.
That is not subject to birth and death. What is subject to birth and death? The body. What is subject to change? The mind. But the Turiya itself is the witness of the birth and the death of the body, birth and the aging and the decay and the death of the body. It itself is not born with the birth of the body. It itself does not age with the aging of the body. It itself does not die with the dying of the body. And the changes of the mind, Turiya itself reveals the changes of the mind. The Mandukya Upanishad, which is a classic text of Advaita Vedanta, it says that you are the Turiya. You are not the waker, dreamer, or deep sleeper. And the whole point is to realize yourself as the Turiya. And it's not really the fourth. Really, when you come to an understanding of it, it is the one which appears as the three.
Correct. Yeah. So now, we earlier in the room there, we both were talking about Wittgenstein, the German philosopher. And Wittgenstein said in one of his writings, our life is a dream, we are asleep, but once in a while we wake up enough to know that we are dreaming. So by tonight, whatever happened today will be a dream. Your childhood is now a dream. What happened 5 minutes ago is a dream. What happens to my words by they reach you, they're gone. So actually this right now, in a sense, is a waking dream because it's ungraspable, right? 1 minute ago is ungraspable. And so this is a waking dream in what we might say a lucid now. And the reason I'm bringing this to our attention right now is this waking dream is frequently referred to as Maya, right? Because it's a projection of consciousness. But anyway, how does this all help us? How does this help us alleviate our existential suffering? What has this to do with the 5 kleshas that the Vedanta talks about? Yeah.
Before I get to that, I know when Deepak says this is all a dream, I would see some skeptical faces. He'd say, no, this is real, and the dreams are dreams, and this is real. But look at it this way. If you imagine something, eating a cookie, you'd say that's an imagination, it's not real. And if I eat a cookie, that's real. But now do this. Imagine eating a cookie and also remember that a cookie which you ate maybe 1 day ago or 2 days ago, the memory of eating a cookie and the imagination of eating a cookie, they seem very similar because both are in the mind and mental. And what Deepak says is this very thing which seems very real now is going to become a memory every fleeting second. It's retreating into memory. When you compare that memory with a fantasy.
When we came into this room, that's
exactly.
a memory, right?
Right now, if you imagine us walking into this room, it's memory. How is that different from the memory of a dream? Every fleeting moment which we call real is quickly, at tremendous speed, disappearing into a dream-like memory. You would still argue, no, but this particular moment feels very real. And Vedanta agrees with you. This present moment feels very real because you are here. You are reality. This moment borrows its reality from you. See, wherever you are, that feels real to you. Imagine, even in your dreams, when you are actually in a dream, you don't know it's a dream, it feels very real. It feels very real at that time. It's because of the presence of consciousness at that present moment which lends reality to it.
So the only continuity in any experience is that which you say I. When you say, where are you? You say, I'm here, right? But if you go inside the body, there's no one there because this body is in I, being experienced in I. Mind is being experienced in I. That I is the only invariant in every dreamlike experience.
Absolutely.
It's the only constant.
Absolutely.
When you were a baby,
Yes.
when you were a teenager, different body, different mind. But the invariant is that luminous consciousness
Right.
that brings that experience, the light of awareness that brings that experience
Right.
to what we call reality.
I'll make a small distinction here. When you say I, that I is not the ego.
Yes.
Yeah. It's I would call it the witness of the ego.
The witness.
Yeah. The ego comes and goes. So when you are deeply absorbed in something, playing a game of tennis or something like that, or immersed in a beautiful musical experience, you lose sense of self. So you'll see, has the I gone there? The ego is not apparent there. But consciousness, that's always there. Otherwise you wouldn't have that experience at all. So that's what he means by the luminous I. But going back to the very important question which Deepak asked, what good is all of this? What's the point of all of this? The point is, it's the most important thing in our lives. The whole point of this, and of all of Indian philosophies, the different schools, it doesn't have to be Advaita Vedanta, it could be Buddhism, it could be Nyaya, Sankhya. The whole point is overcoming suffering and attainment of true lasting peace and happiness. How does that work? Think about it. Where is suffering? There is suffering in the world, suffering of the body, suffering of the mind. But that consciousness which reveals the body, mind and the world, does it suffer in itself? You will see no. I'll tell you a very funny story. This person who goes up to a Swami in the Himalayas and asks, Swami, I'm in great suffering, I'm suffering, I'm miserable, help me. And the Swami says, are you aware of your misery? He says, yes, of course. That's why I've come here. I'm unhappy. I'm deeply aware of my unhappiness. That's why I've come to you. And the Swami says, if you are aware of your unhappiness, of your misery, then that misery is an object and you are the consciousness aware of that object. You are aware of the object means you cannot be that object. You are aware of unhappiness means you cannot be unhappy. You are aware of unhappiness in the mind. Think about it. The funny thing is, it works like this. The person goes and thinks about it. And if you do that, you will see a certain distance opens up between you as the experiencer and the experienced unhappiness. And he comes back and says that, you are right. I am not unhappy. I am experiencing an unhappiness in the mind and I am so peaceful now. And the Swami scolds him immediately. No, you are not peaceful. You are the witness of the peace in your mind. And that's important. Because the moment he distances himself from his unhappiness and he thinks, I'm at peace, you're trapped again. Because that's the peace in the mind. And the mind is changeable. It will change into unhappiness again. And you think, I was very happy at the Rubin Museum, but now I have stepped out into Times Square, I'm unhappy. No, both of them are appearances and disappearances in the mind. And this is not speculation. If you look at it, this is an accurate report of what's actually happening. Vedanta just brings it to your notice. More we notice this, the more we stabilize ourselves in that witness consciousness, the more we are free of the ups and downs of the mind and the body and the world. Yeah. So that's where the whole purpose lies.
Going back to the 5 kleshas, with this basis.
Yeah.
So, the 5 kleshas in Vedanta are
in yoga
actually. Yeah, yoga. Not knowing the true nature of reality, grasping and clinging, that which is ungraspable, fear of impermanence, identifying with the ego, the fear of death. They're all connected, right?
Right.
So if we ask this question, what am I? Who am I? Go through the process, Neti, Neti, Shankaracharya's great hymn, and we get to this source, then all these things disappear in a sense, including the fear of death.
Right.
What, in your view, how should we explain death in this scheme?
It's interesting. What is death in this scheme? Right. You remind me of this meeting I was in. I saw there's something called Meetup these days.
Yeah.
And you see there's something called a philosopher's cafe. And in that, philosophers get together in the New York Ethical Society, and they discuss the great questions of philosophy. And he said the 5 great unsolved questions of philosophy, we're going to discuss it in such and such day. So I turned up for that meeting because I was attracted. And what are the 5 great questions? If you Google it on Oxford University Press website, you will find the 5 great questions of unsolved questions of philosophy are, I'm telling you this because one of those questions is what Deepak asked, and 4 of the 5 are related directly to consciousness. The first question is, do we have free will? The second question they discussed was, what can we know, if anything at all? The question of epistemology and skepticism.
What are the limits of knowledge?
Of knowledge, yes. And the third one is, straight away, what am I? Or who am I? That was the third question, which is the fundamental question in Vedanta. Then the fourth question was, what is death? And the fifth one was, what is justice? But the fourth question, what is death? The philosophers themselves said, we are not talking about death from the point of view of a doctor, which Deepak is an expert in and he knows. It's an interesting topic for a doctor too. But in this system, as a person, what is death to me? If I'm not the body, then what is death to me? In Vedanta, death is the passing away of this particular body you are embodied in.
This experience.
This particular experience, it stops because this body cannot support the Jeeva any longer. Maybe it's old, maybe it's damaged, so it dies. And the Jeeva moves on. The individual person moves on. And all of this is again an experience in consciousness. So in consciousness, birth and death of the body take place. Which means you as consciousness, even you as Jeeva, you are not subject to death in that sense that that death is not the end of us.
Death happens to the experience of body, mind, and the world that goes with it.
Right.
Which is a changing experience anyway.
Right.
But not to that which is the witnessing awareness in which that experience happens.
Absolutely. Let me make a point. It's a subtle point, but very interesting. You know, when people say, how do you know a person exists after death? When the person is dead, obviously the body is dead and you burn it or you bury it or whatever, it's gone. So how do you know the person is also gone? But notice something, there's a very quick switch which has happened, which goes unnoticed. As long as I am alive, when you say the person, by that I understand I, this entity called Sarvapriyananda, which is encased in this body. That's what I understand as the person. Right? And death is understood as death of the body. But the moment the body is dead, the materialist will say, that person called Sarvapriyananda is gone. But you at no point did you see this person called Sarvapriyananda disappearing. You saw the body dying and being burnt and or buried.
And at no point did you actually see a body that was a fixed entity as Sarvapriyananda, right?
That's another point. It's a stream of changes.
It's a stream, intermittent flow of sensations, images, feelings, thoughts that we call a body.
Yes.
Right?
In fact, this lady, she told me in Santa Barbara, she's a nun there, she said, recently Swami was passing by a shop window and I saw my reflection in the window and I thought, who is this old lady? And I said, Swami, life went by so fast. I still think of myself as a 20-something.
Yeah, the I never changed, right?
Yes.
Only the experience of the I changed.
Yeah.
As this body, this mind, this experience of the world.
Right. So death from a Vedantic perspective or a yogic perspective is the moving on of the Jeeva from one non-functional body to another experience in maybe another body.
So you started off by saying this is not philosophy, this is actually not even religion in a sense. It's not a system of thought, it's based on experience and knowledge directly. And that comes from, I would say, yoga, right? The word yoga implies union with the self.
I would, in fact, it's equally true to say that it's all of these. You can regard Vedanta as a Advaita as a philosophy, and certainly it is taught in departments of philosophy in India. You can regard it as a system of thought. You can regard it as a religion because it's actually the foundation of religion. I would look at it that way.
Religious experience.
Yeah, the foundation of. But it's grounded in experience all the time. It does not talk about a single thing which is different from what we experience all the time. So yes, a direct experience of this, what we are talking about, there are techniques in yoga which help us. But maybe we'll talk more about that.
No, we have 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Very quickly, Raj Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga. And then we are done. We have everything done in less than an hour.
Yes, and thanks to Deepak, he structured it so well. You would say, so what are the procedures? There are basically 4 major classes of practices. One class of practice is what you might call meditative practices. And there's a vast range. In the Rubin Museum itself, there have been exhibits and talks and demonstrations of various kinds of mostly Buddhist tradition practices. So there's a wide range of meditation practices. In Hinduism, you have the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, which is a classic manual of meditation. So that's one group. The other group is based on emotion and feeling, the Bhakti traditions. So that's called Bhakti Yoga. Love, yes. And then there's a third group of practices which seeks to convert our action, work, into spiritual practice. So what you might call, in a generic way, doing good to others, living unselfishly, living for a higher purpose. So all of that comes under karma yoga. How do I transform my action from a negativity, from a prison, into something that frees me, takes me to freedom? But the one which is a personal favorite, so I've saved it for the end, are the Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, which are, like I just mentioned, the 3 stages, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, or the seer and the seen, Drigdrishya, or the method of the 5 sheets, the physical, the vital, the mental, the intellectual, and the causal sheet, and so the bliss sheet. So there are different, you might call them philosophical spiritual philosophies, sciences which are investigation directly based upon what you experience right now to lead you to that intuitive experience of I am that immortal pure consciousness. So yes, 4 yogas.
Verifiable.
Directly verifiable.
Directly verifiable.
Yes.
Okay, so that's Vedanta 101. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you. So,
gentlemen, thank you so much, Deepak, for that inquiry and structure, and Swamiji for this really deeply thought out and beautifully articulated 101ishness of Vedanta. It was hugely helpful, and also in so many ways this conversation has been the foundation of everything we talk about and do here at the Rubin. And not only did you address the nature of time and memory, which of course is sort of the focal point of our understanding of the future for this year, but also the notion of karma, which we're going to be addressing in much greater depth in the fall. Karena Gore is going to guide us on this notion of karma and interconnectedness that we should be experiencing in a much more holistic way in understanding how we relate and are part of and not separate from our environment. And that informs our relationship with ecological issues that are coming to the fore right now. So thank you so much for that primer. So we will take questions, but then again, I know I've been very successful in separating myself from my awareness of 8:30 curfew and translating that and into your awareness of the curfew of 8:30. So your questions, if they could, be very brief so we can have as full an explanation as possible. I see an urgent hand, 3rd row from the back.
Yes.
And probably, yes, we want to suffer the 1st row as well. So, yeah, first you and then you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'd like to thank you for your thought-provoking teachings, and I'd like to use them as a basis for reducing my suffering and achieving lasting happiness.
Yes.
do I take it from what you've said that the way for me to do that is to see that my suffering, my pain, is a consequence of an objectification that my consciousness creates, and thereby detach myself from that objective suffering? And if that is the case, do I make myself less of a sentient being?
I'll take that.
Let's take it, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, it's just the opposite of that. What has happened there is consciousness not objectifying something but becoming identified with, for example, I am this body. So a pinprick here is a pinprick into me. Now what is a neutral sensation suddenly becomes a terrible, it becomes, ouch, it's hurting me. You might say, even if I give a pinprick to an enlightened person, wouldn't it hurt? It's very interesting. I attended a conference on pain, a conference of medical doctors, and there was a section for talk therapies. But one doctor, he drew these 3 concentric circles, and he said the outer circle, the 3 circles, the innermost circle shows the actual pain physiologically suffered by a patient of chronic pain. And the 2 outer circles are the mental expectation of pain, the anxiety caused by pain, and the social disabilities caused by chronic pain, all of which are subjective. So he said about 80% of the discomfort experienced from pain is subjective rather than the actual neuronal activity in the body. Now that is a tremendously interesting fact, which means even from a psychological perspective, if I could see this in an objective fashion, that this is not me, I am embodied in this, I understand the damage to the body, I understand what's going on there, and understand this is something that should be attended to, but I am not suffering along with the body. Is this possible? And the accounts of practitioners, enlightened people, it seems to say that it is possible.
So there are many ways of phrasing this. This is the essence of it, but one way to understand it also is, and it's in the Vedanta, it's in Buddhism, all suffering comes from the illusion of the separate self that doesn't exist. When you transcend the ego mind,
yes,
there's no pain, even no physical pain in transcendence. Samadhi, you can't have pain, right?
Right.
Or close to Samadhi, you can't have pain. Physical
I'll make a quick distinction. One is what he talks about, samadhi. Now, our attention has limited capacity. If your attention is completely focused on something, then you are not aware of other things. So if you can have a tremendously deep meditative state, even an operation on the body, a physical cutting of the body without anesthesia, it is not felt, it's actually been done. We have accounts of such things. But that's because you have focused the attention tremendously on one, it's completely absorbed. That's one way, that's the yogic way to transcend pain. Now there is a Vedantic way to transcend pain, which is born of this philosophical intuition that I am the witness of the pain, and therefore what I witness is an object, just as the object is not me. Pain is also an object.
It's a selective identification with this particular localized experience.
Right, it's a localized experience. Can you objectify pain? In fact, we don't have to be enlightened for that. To a certain extent, it will work even for all of us if you try to watch pain carefully. It becomes an object. Robert Wright, who is why Buddhism is correct, why Buddhism is true. There he says, after a period of meditation, he begins to see unpleasant sensations as becoming more neutral sensations. And it's a clear experience which he has. Yeah.
Next question.
Yes, thank you so much. I would like to take both of you home with me. And I'm always telling my husband, very frequently, it's all a dream. It's all memory. I'm always saying that. But I've experienced being a meditator for many years in a deep meditative state myself as just pure energy, boundless, like not limited by the form of my body. And it's an incredible experience, and I'm wondering if that is in the Turiya state, where you a person actually experiences what maybe deep sleep state is, but we're conscious of it.
All right.
And I just want to say something about the pain.
Right.
I was lucky enough to have spent time with 3 enlightened beings while living in India. And someone asked one of them about pain in the body. And he said, everything is made up of energy. And if you look at the pain as pulsating energy rather than having the concept like, oh, this is pain, then it transforms it. And I experience that if I'm in pain, to just see it as energy rather than labeling it. Because I think we ground it in the body more when we label it pain.
Right.
But
should I take that?
Yeah, please.
All right. 3 responses there, quickly. The first one is the most important one. It is said that in deep meditative state, your words, that you experience yourself as energy. Yes. Now, what Vedanta would say there is, whatever you experience, have you experienced it? You say yes, then that is not the Turiya. That which experiences, that's the real you. So you might experience a continuum of pure energy, but that which experiences that continuum of pure energy, that is the Turiya, that's the real you. The second comment I would like to make is, Turiya is not a state. It is that consciousness in which the 3 states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep come and go. Just as gold can be made into a necklace, an earring, or a bracelet, but gold in itself is not an ornament. Gold is the reality, the substance which is made into different ornaments. So it's like asking, is gold a new kind of ornament? No, gold is the reality of all ornaments. So Turiya is the reality of all these 3 states. And the last one, absolutely. If you see pain as an energy, which it is actually, if you relabel it, it should work. As I just said, 80% of pain, if it is subjective, then the subjective change in your understanding of pain will have an effect on your experience of pain.
The key thing is not to suppress the experience of pain, but actually bring awareness to it. And when you bring awareness to it, because awareness is self-regulating, self-organizing, self-healing, self-evolving, just bringing awareness will diffuse the pain. Rumi has a poem, he says, the cure of pain is in the pain.
So we've got a hand right up there, thank you. And who else on this side? Yes, please, Aline, and with this gentleman with his hand up there with the glasses, thank you.
Hi there. Being mostly Westerner, although I've been part of a spiritual group, would you say that when people talk about the soul, that's the Jeeva that you refer to?
Right. The word soul is ambiguous. So when you have phrases like, he's a good soul, or the soul left the body, or is the soul of the party. Now you're using the word soul in different ways. Normally, from the Vedantic perspective, what you generally call the soul is the consciousness already limited by the mind. So the mind is working there. In fact, precisely what you call the Jeeva. Theologically speaking, it's the Jeeva which would be the equivalent of the soul in Vedanta. Yeah.
So our next question, yes, thank you. The mic's coming to you.
Wanted to ask about karma yoga. So even though we're pure consciousness, but we live in this reality and we live in this time and space, what does Vedanta say about how you should direct your actions or your thoughts according to Vedanta? And also a follow-up question, slightly unrelated, is there such a thing as good and evil in Vedanta? Or what is the meaning of our actions if we are pure consciousness?
Right. Should I take that?
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry, but all of these questions are so close to my heart and is in the Vedanta, so I'm sort of, yes. When we experience this reality, we experience it as beings in a body with a mind, in a world populated by other beings, so action becomes meaningful then. You are pure consciousness, as all of us are. But now when you act, you're already assuming a person. Pure consciousness plus the mind plus the body, this person, and then action becomes meaningful. But action from the perspective of I am pure consciousness through a body and mind, that will be very different from action from the perspective of I am a body who was born and is going to get old and diseased and suffer and die. In the second case, action will be born of anxiety and grasping and fear and prejudice. We'll be scared and angry, all of that, because I'm a little being. I can be crushed. I will be crushed out of existence within moments. So that kind of action is unenlightened action. But when you realize yourself as Satchidananda, even a conviction, even before enlightenment, even a conviction there, then your action is much more free, much more relaxed, and much more, I would say, universal. You do not act so much for this particular body and mind as much for a more altruistic approach to the entire world. So that is the basis of karma yoga. And the good second, good and evil. It's again a huge question, the entire question of ethics, in fact. Yes, there is good and evil. In fact, dharma and adharma. So at the relative level, which is called vyavaharika in Vedanta, there is certainly good and there is evil. That which is good or dharma, you get happiness and pleasure out of it as the consequence. Law of karma will give you that. That which, if I am deliberately, consciously, I do naughty things, then the result will be pain and suffering. So dharma leads to sukha, that is, goodness leads to happiness, and evil, adharma, leads to dukkha, unhappiness. And this mixture is our life. So good and evil, they continue as long as this transactional life is continuing. But in enlightenment, you go beyond that.
Go beyond the
opposites. Go beyond the opposites, yeah.
So Swamiji, you mentioned free will. Do we have free will?
Oh God.
And this is an important question because, as long as you're stuck in the clutches of karma, it seems there is limitation to free will. Only in liberation, as we call it, are we truly free. And even when we are truly free as liberated, enlightened souls, then there's no need to make choices anyway because the universe is flowing through you spontaneously anyway, right?
Yes.
It's just in the act of being, you're free. So how do we solve this dilemma? Is there free will? Is there, I think karma is the conditioned mind, right? Which is not really free.
Right. Well, don't get me started. It's a 2-hour lecture.
Well, we have to summarize.
There is no 8:30.
Yeah, but let me just put it in Swami Vivekananda's words. He put it this way: free will is a misnomer. And whenever there is will, it's not free. It's a part of a deterministic chain, a chain of causation. But freedom is possible. That is what is moksha or nirvana. I'll leave it at that.
Perfect.
Ali, we have a question in the front. You had a question, didn't you, sir? And one right at the back, Lynette. Thank you so much. Yours first. Yeah, thank you.
I continue to struggle with the idea of karma. I mean, I find that incompatible with the view of Brahman acting as Brahman and as being the sole doer, unlimited by everything. So how can... Karma is also a part of consciousness, and so, but the idea of accumulation of karma by Brahman seems incompatible.
Let me stop you right there. I just take the answer is in the question. Accumulation of karma by Brahman doesn't happen.
Period.
In Vedanta, that's why they talk about two truths, the absolute and the relative. That's why the distinction is made between Brahman and Jeeva, the absolute reality which we actually are, and this person. So at the personal level, there is karma. There is good, there is evil, and you violate...
At the level of the Jeeva.
At the level of the Jeeva, at the level of the person, of the individual soul. There is all of this. And you violate it at your own peril. The law of karma
never loses an address.
Karma never loses, and that's a very good way of putting it. So you violate it at your own peril, yes. But But at the absolute level, there is no person, there is no world, there is no action, there is no question of karma at all. And you would say, okay, but what is the truth? The truth is the absolute. But the absolute inhabits this world, in this world of appearance. And it's not as strange as that. You see a screen and you see a movie on it. And in the movie, if you see Harry Potter and Dumbledore and all of that, that's one level of reality. And another level of reality is that it's light and a screen. Both are there, but one is a fundamental reality, one is a dependent reality.
But how should we interpret Jeeva then?
Jiva is Brahman conditioned, by body mind, yes.
So if you've got another question, come back in the fall when we're going to explain
Right.
karma. And you'll be very welcome. Yes, hello.
Hi, I'll try to be pretty straightforward. So I guess my question is, in an understanding of the world and the universe and ourself, in which the all is all there is and from which everything arises, where did separation and duality arise from, and for which purpose? And then I guess the other question was related to the question you asked about pain, is if we understand how to process pain and even how to transmute it, like the woman mentioned, what is the purpose of pain? Is it just the purpose of self-knowledge and the self-knowing itself through that experience of external experience of which that is? Or is it something else?
Okay. The first question is, what is the purpose of this non-dual reality itself?
How did it arise, or why did it
The
arise?
experience of duality and suffering.
How did duality arise?
Or like why does duality exist?
All right.
Or our experience of duality, or duality, in its manifestation.
The absolute experiences itself as the relative.
Right. This is a very deep question, and very difficult to actually to put in language, because language functions at the level of duality. It's in this world that language actually works. But it's put in this, different ways of explaining this are there. One is that why does duality arise? That question itself, if you ask a non-dualist like Shankara or something, the answer will startle you. He will say that duality does not arise. You say, then what is it that we are experiencing? And the answer will be, you are experiencing it. But is it a reality? If you ask, why did those things happen in my dream? The answer would be, they did not happen. But then we would say, then why did I see it? Because it was a dream. Now here, why are we seeing it? Because there are many answers. This is the expression of Brahman. It's not real duality. Really it is non-dual, appearing as a duality. It's an expression of Brahman. It's a misreading of Brahman in ignorance, in Maya. It is the play of Brahman. Leela. You take your pick. There are many ways of putting it, but the crucial thing to understand is non-duality is the reality experienced as duality.
It's the nature of consciousness to be conscious. So it experiences itself as me and other, but all the while it's just consciousness.
Alan Watts, he was pretty well known here, especially on the West Coast, in California, in the 60s and 70s. He says this question, he answers it, he says, with a child's tale, which he composed himself. Beautiful. He says, God existed eternally, but eternally existing can be very boring after some time. So God got bored of existing eternally, and then he thought, what can I do? I want to play. But then what would he play with? There's nothing else except God. So God thought about that. And then, because he was God, he was awfully clever, he came upon a solution. God pretended to be not God. So now he had somebody to play with. God and himself, the God itself pretending to be not God. But then, because it is God, Alan Watts writes, he is awfully good at what he does. So when he pretends to be not God, he forgot that he was God. And now, that is the answer to your question. He is in suffering, he is in trouble, he thinks he is a body or a particular person in this world, abandoned, and it is God who has forgotten that he is God and is searching for God. That explains the whole universe. I think it's a beautiful story.
And the popular phrasing of that is, we're all gone in drag.
So we've talked a lot about experience tonight, and indeed that's really the foundation of what we at the Reuben hope to convey to you, because sure, we can get Vedanta 101, we can intellectualize it, but unless we experience it and internalize it, we're not going to actually inhabit it. So this is what I would invite you, or indeed charge you to do this evening, and you can still do it tonight at the Reuben. How many of you would characterize yourselves as anxious? Okay, some of you are honest. That's good. How many of you would characterize yourselves as hopeful? Okay, thank you. You're a beautiful, misguided group. That's wonderful. So, as you leave the museum tonight, you will pass by the bookstore, and if you want a signed copy of You Are the Universe or The Healing Self by Deepak Chopra, that is available to you. But there's one other thing you can do. On the wall by the spiral staircase is an installation called A Monument to the Anxious and the Hopeful. Now, if those of you who are anxious about something in the future, you can take up a card that says, I am anxious because, and you write that answer down. And then what are you going to do? You're going to have this glorious sensation of objectifying the anxiety as you place it on the wall, and you see it apart from yourself. And that is exactly the lesson that Swamiji conveyed.
Absolutely.
To us. And then you will see everybody else's anxieties lined up, and you'll suddenly see yours in diminution, in perspective to the greater swell of what New York City feels about the future. Those of you on the hopeful side can do the same thing, but you're going to realize, just as Swamiji told us, that, oh, my hope is actually not too far away from somebody's anxiety. And it's good that I can actually see them both side by side. And now you can go out into the world and have some greater distance between you and what you think you are. And that's kind of the lesson that collectively we at the Reuben and we at the Reuben hope to convey, just a little bit, a step at a time, a day at a time, which means you have to come back every day and try it again. Would you realize that? And that includes all of you at Facebook, following us and this extraordinary conversation between Deepak Chopra and Swami Sarvapriyananda. So we'll take one more question. Who's burning to ask a question? Hands up, hands up. Somebody's already got the mic. Great, go for it. Thank you. You need the microphone. Sorry, we're going to get that to you. Thank you, Ali.
I have two questions. One is it possible in deep sleep to avoid errors, making errors? Even I am ignorant. In deep sleep stage, is it possible to make errors,
Okay,
but even I am ignorant?
That's the question? Yeah. Well, there's no possibility of making any kind of error, doing anything right or wrong in deep sleep, because there you do not experience a body, you do not experience a mind, so you cannot do anything, think anything, say anything, so you're saved from making errors in deep sleep.
Okay.
Yes.
Then ignorant? I can be ignorant. Ignorance is there.
Yes. Advaita Vedanta says deep sleep is a state of ignorance, yes.
Okay. Number two questions. In case of shining Brahman within us, individual, there is a degree. Like Brahman is shining within both of you very with force, but in my case, as an individual, I didn't get the shining from Brahman. In that case, why Jeeva and Sanskar or Karma is working with me differently than you all shining so well?
No, that's a good question, but what Vedanta would say to that is, first of all, don't say Brahman is shining brightly or not brightly. I am shining forth. Own Brahman as yourself. Step forward and boldly say, it's not that my Brahman is not so shiny and your Brahman is more shiny. It is the same shining everywhere. I'll end with a quote from a very unlikely source. John Updike. I read it yesterday. He says, what a beautiful quote. We scale in an intense radiance. We do not see this because it is all we see.
It's just like the fish in the water sees water but doesn't know it's water.
The shining of Brahman is all that you are seeing. Yeah.
May I end with a Vedantic quote?
It would be beautiful.
If you can see it, if you can touch it, if you can perceive it, if you can think about it, imagine it, conceptualize it, it's not real.
So, unfortunately, that means the gifts that we wanted to convey to Swamiji and Deepak are also illusions. But
just as the Swami and Deepak are also illusions.
Yes, but know that the intention of our thanks is not one. And that is all I can say. What we would like to present our speakers and our teachers tonight really is, we've called this conversation, the Vedas, everything there is. These are not everything there is in the Rubin Museum, but they are collection highlights from the Rubin Museum. And so, for your libraries, for your fellow scholars, for yourselves, please accept these humble gifts from the Rubin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.